The first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the rules on the board. Look at the 5 rules on the board. If you're watching this video, we're going to follow step by step using these procedures. So first we're going to select the correct quantity. We're going to distribute by multiplying. We're going to change the signs in the second row, combine in each column, and then when necessary, bring down the next term. With me, please do this. We're going to make a large division box. And now it's important as we go further into long division that we recognize every single one of these terms. I have 3, 2, 1, and no zeros is represented. So inside right now, I'm going to write down 3x cubed minus 8x squared plus 7x minus 10. On the outside is going to be x plus 2. Quietly, please ask your elbow partner right now, were they in class on Friday? That will determine how much they understand. If they were not here, this is going to be brand new and quite confusing, and we will redirect them back to what they need to learn. This is not something you have previously learned in any math class. We are adding to what you learned in middle school using long division and now adding polynomials or variables to this. So at this point, there should be no talking. Please underline for me, underline the outside x and the inside 3x cubed. In my head, this is how I process it. I know I have an x on the outside. I need to figure out what term should I multiply it by to end up with 3x cubed. So if I was teaching this for the first time like I did on Friday, I would say 1 times what quantity is 3? That would be 3. And x times what amount of x's would give you x cubed. And the way we think of that is I need 3 x's, I only have 1. I need 2 more. This is the quantity that I'm selecting. So 3x squared is the quantity. I go to this x squared and I put a 3x squared on top. I've selected the correct quantity. I'm moving quickly because we're not learning this for the first time. Now I'm going to distribute this. So I'm going to distribute the 3x squared to both terms on the outside. So 3x squared times x is 3x cubed. Give me 1 second to move this up. So this is 3x cubed. And then I'm going to distribute to the positive 2 to get 6x squared. Now on the second line or the second row, I need to change the signs of the 3 and the 6. So whatever sign you were provided, we're going to change the signs. They were positive, we make them negative. Once again, if you missed class on Friday, you are completely lost. And you're going to need to watch the video from Friday to understand how to do this work. So this becomes negative, and in this case, this becomes negative. Step number 4 is they combine straight down. So these cancel out. They're additive inverses. And I ask myself, negative 8 and negative 6. Okay, that gives me a negative 14. Bring down the variable x squared. And step number 5 on the board says bring down the next term. We start all 5 steps over again. I underline the x out front, and I underline the negative 14x squared down below. And I do the exact same thing. I go x times what gives me a negative 14 squared. X times what gives me a negative 14x squared. Okay, that's going to be a negative 14x. If I multiply these, I end up with a negative 14x squared. This is my correct quantity. So again, I come up here, and I'm going to put in the correct quantity of negative 14x. I go on to step number 2, which I'm distributing. So I'm taking this quantity times each of the items out front. I'm starting with always the outside. Negative 14x times x is negative 14x squared. Negative 14x times positive 2 is a negative 28x. Step number 3 says always change the sign on the second row. Change the signs, change the signs. Step 4 says combine down in each column. These are additive inverses. They're exactly the same with different signs. They cancel out. And when I add these, I end up with 35x. Okay, step 5 says if there is a term, bring it down. So I'm on the last cycle of doing this. So I underline the x and I underline the 35x. X times what gives us 35x? And the answer is a positive 35. Okay, I'm going to distribute. So when I distribute, remember I'm multiplying. I always do the outside first and then the inside. So positive 35 times x is 35x. Positive 35 times 2 is positive 70. Change the signs on everything on the second row and combine. These cancel out. I'm left with negative 80. Okay, now I have to write the final answer. So I take whatever is up top and I write it down. And whenever the remainder is anything other than 0, I write, and remember it's counterclockwise, I write the remainder all the way over what's out front. This is my answer. We are now going to evaluate this using a different procedure. We're going to take whatever this is, this quantity, and we're going to set it equal to 0 and solve. A lot of you can just do this in your head. So I'm going to subtract 2 from the other side to isolate the x. Whatever x equals, in this case it's -2, I want you to put that on the outside. Now we're going to come back here and we're going to identify the degree. That means the largest exponent on a variable. In this case it is a 3. I'm going to come down below and very small, because eventually you're not going to be doing this. It's a placeholder for each value. So 3, 2, 1, and 0. Next up, we're going to take the coefficients that correspond with x cubed, x squared, x, and x to the 0, and we're going to write those down. So 3, -8, 7, and -10. 3, -8, 7, and -10. And remember, we're using the silly acronym, DMAMA. So drop down the first value, multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply, add as we go through until we get a final answer. So ultimately what we're doing is, it's like if I gave you this equation and I said, hey, plug in -2 and come up with an answer. That's ultimately what we're doing. So we're going to drop down the first value. Bless you, we always multiply back here. So I'm multiplying to get -6. I'm combining down to get a -14. I'm multiplying -2 times -14 is a +28. I'm combining down to get 35. I'm multiplying to get -70. I'm combining to get a -80. What does this mean? It means if I gave you this polynomial function and I told you to take out a graphing calculator and I wanted you to graph it, you would find that for this function, when you went to -2 on the graph for an x value, it would correspond with -80. Here we go. You ready? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm underlining and I'm asking myself, x times what is 2x cubed? And if you're confused, I'm coming off to the side and I'm saying x times 2 is 2x, but I need 3 x's, I need 2 more. So in the column that has only the x squares, I'm going to place a 2x squared. So above this, I'm writing 2x squared. Then I'm going to distribute first on the outside. So x times 2x squared is 2x cubed. 2x squared times -7 is -14x squared. Change the sign and everything on the second level and combine. The first term should always be added in inverses. So if we look back to our last problem, notice how they cancel. They cancel. They cancel. If it's not canceling, you have selected the wrong quantity. Now I'm combining down to get 4x squared, and I bring down, and I do the exact same process. Underline and underline. X times what is 4x squared? It would be 4x. So 4x times x is 4x squared. I've done it right. 4x times -7 is -28x. The biggest mistake I saw students make on Friday is they change the sign of the first term on the second row, but they forgot to change the sign of the second term on the second row. Okay, so these are going to cancel out. They're additive inverses. I'm combined to get 31x, and I bring down the last term. So it's my last cycle. Underline and underline. X times what is 31x? It's a +31. Multiply to get 31x. I got to grab a calculator. Take 31 times 7, and do we end up with 217? Is that right? 217 negative. I change a sign. I change a sign. It cancels. They're different. So when I combine them, I need to subtract and keep the sign of the larger number. So just as importantly as doing all the steps, it's what does this mean? So for an answer, when I divide, I get 2x squared plus 4x plus 31. Whenever the remainder is anything other than 0, to correctly write it, I'm going to go and do counterclockwise. 2 16s on top, on the bottom is x minus 7. Okay, please do me a favor. I want you to do the following. I want you to make a large capital L and really extend out the bottom of the L. Okay, then, so everybody's doing this. Then let's just look up here to this part. If I take this outside, which would be the denominator if I wrote this as a rational expression, if I set this equal to 0 and I added 7 to the opposite side, x would equal 7. So I've taken this part, which would really be the denominator if I wrote this as a rational expression, and once I set the denominator equal to 0, I'm going to take this value of 7 and place it on the outside. Up above, if you look at your paper, the degree or the highest exponent is 3. So 3, 2, 1, and 0. And below the 0, we're going to make a box. Then I'm going to go back and I'll put the correct numbers that correspond with each, called the coefficients, in front of each one. Now, who can tell me, what do we think will be the final value here? Anybody? A little bit louder. Somebody said it. 216. We're doing the exact same thing using a different procedure. So I'm going to put this on pause. Go. So how are we doing this? So we're going to do that D-momma. The D-momma concept is only applying with synthetic division. So D stands for drop down. So I've dropped down the first number, and then I'm just going to multiply everything back to here and combine down in columns. So I multiply to get 14. I combine down to get 4. Now, how did I get 4? Well, they're different signs, so I subtract and I keep the sign of the larger number. I am for multiplying, and I combine down. They're the same sign, so I add. I multiplied to get 217. I combined to get 216, and there's nothing more for me to do. I'm done.